Good Sunday morning and welcome to Rochester in Focus. I'm Lynette Adams. Teachers and students are spending a lot of time online these days, but transferring teaching skills from the classroom to virtual learning isn't easy for everyone. Some teachers are frustrated and think they're getting a failing grade. Well, coming up on the show today, a man who is referred to as a technology education Jedi. I'm talking about John O'Keefe. O'Keefe works for Logical Operations in Brighton. O'Keefe has studied the impact of technology on students and has designed curriculum and trained more than 3,500 adult educators. They have become certified virtual educators. John, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Let's talk about a certified virtual educator.
Sure.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about a person who has taken our Certified Virtual Educator program, who has taken this 4-hour professional development course and trained on how to be a better teacher when it comes to teaching online.
What exactly does that mean? How can you become a better teacher online?
That's a great question. Pretty simple. When teachers learn how to teach, they go to school for that, right? And so they'll spend 4 years, 5 years, 6 years learning how to be teachers. That's an experience we actually start learning when we're 5 years old, believe it or not. So you started going to school when you were about 5 or 6. I started going to school when I was about 5 or 6. We start learning all about how to learn. If you remember your kindergarten or your first grade, it's all about, now I raise my hand. Here's how I ask a question. Here's what happens when I need to go to the bathroom. And that repeats as we get better and better and better at learning. So by the time we're in high school or we're in college, we know all the things we need to know about how to learn in a traditional environment. And then we go on to become teachers, so we create a cycle. We do the things that worked best for us. The challenge that everyone's facing right now is that virtual learning is a completely different subject. So all of these things that we've learned, both in our education and by being educated, are kind of thrown out the window, which is what is leaving teachers feeling like they're spinning in place when they're trying to teach virtual.
So some people would argue, well, if I just keep practicing, I'll get better. What's the benefit of taking the training as opposed to just continuing to practice and get better?
Sure, and practice is incredibly important, but we're on a timeline here. Kids right now are incredibly frustrated. They're challenged. They feel disengaged from the whole learning process. You've got parents who are frustrated, who are seeing their children who are pulling their hair out saying, I can't do this. So yes, on a long enough timeline, if we were to virtually learn for 10 years, we would start picking up on the same type of cycle that we pick up when we're in a traditional classroom. But we just have to ramp up faster than that.
So how do you begin to engage students? What's the starting point?
The starting point is really understanding and admitting 3 truths to virtual education. The first is that most teachers, and I'll hazard a guess and say 98% of all teachers, have spent significantly more time learning and teaching in a traditional classroom than they have in a virtual one. So it's a whole new skill set. The second thing that we have to accept is that you can't simply lift and place your curriculum for what works in a traditional classroom into a virtual environment and expect the same results. And the third one, which gets so often forgotten, is that students have never done this before either. It's easy to look at a young person with a cell phone and say, well, they know how to use technology, so learning online would be easy for them. But it's not, because they've spent their whole lives learning in a traditional classroom. So those 3 things, when you start to accept those truths, you can start to move forward and break down the differences between a traditional classroom and a virtual one.
So it's really it's about more than just performing on camera or being in front of a camera. It's really about transferring what you do in the classroom to online and in front of the camera.
Well, absolutely. I love to give this analogies for our sports fans that are out there. When Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time, personally I believe that, when he transitioned to baseball, the assumption would be is that he would be an amazing baseball player because he's one of the world's best athletes. But he did better than most of us would do, but he was never at the same level because it's two completely different skill sets. Just because you're athletic doesn't mean you can play every sport. And for teachers, the struggle that they have is they have all this experience teaching one way. And when you move into a virtual environment where you have to start considering, how am I going to build community in a virtual classroom? How am I going to handle access problems? Meaning, some students have a lot of technology in their house, some have very little. How am I going to handle structure? What works in a 50-minute class in person may not work in a virtual class. And how are we going to handle curriculum, especially when students are less likely to stay engaged virtually because of all the other distractions? How can we find curriculum that connects to our students so they're having an awesome experience online?
What are you hearing from students?
Oh, it's a struggle, right? And for every good experience, there's been 50 or 60 bad experiences that I hear from students. A lot of it is that my teachers are expecting me to be on webcam. They're expecting me to be making eye contact with them, and my camera isn't very good. A lot of small little nuances here. A great story I have is a neighbor of mine has a daughter in the school districts who's learning virtually, and she was taking a math test. And they timed the test. And that's fine in a classroom where you know that I control the whole environment. But what happened? Her internet went out for 5 minutes. And when she logged back in, the test was over and she didn't get to finish.
Wow.
That doesn't help the student. Having a timed exam is something that you would always do in a physical classroom, but you have to think very, very carefully about when you're teaching virtual.
Wow. So I know that teachers can take this training. Some may say, well, you know, I just got to get through this school year. But you think that virtual learning is here to stay, and this is training that you would be able to use for years to come?
I do believe that. I think that virtual and hybrid training approaches have shown a flexibility and adaptability in the school districts that are doing them well. And I think that allowing students to be able to take education in a comfortable environment will relieve some of the stress that's going on in their personal lives. I think that this is the type of thing that we're going to see continue to grow, and we're in the next kind of historical era of education. The same way a lot of people are starting to realize that working from home is now a very realistic possibility, whereas 6 months ago, 9 months ago, they may have said, oh, this will never work.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming and talking with us. We want to let people know that they can sign up for this training. It is $149.
That's
for
correct.
the training, and we'll have a link on our website on how you can sign up. Again, John O'Keefe, thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I think teachers can benefit as well as students.
Thank you so much for having me.